being a few minutes late. We do have a presentation here this morning. There are a couple members of the council behind the screen there that once the presentation is completed, we will pull the screen back down. So we are recording the meetings. There is a sign up there, and I got Shannon here that records the meetings later on to the committee members that are not able to attend the meeting. So we're going to call the meeting to order. We have acceptance of the agenda, rules of order, follow-up from the last general meeting of August 24th. We have a presentation this morning on the tobacco pilot project. I'm going to provide an update on the Watersense election law, as well as an update on the Hydro One equity participation proposal, an update on the Northern Border Summit. We want to have a discussion with the community on the proposed cannabis legislation. As well, we have business from the floor, one resolution, a number of announcements to make, and then we'll announce the next general meeting. As it's been a custom, we do ask for a moment of silence this morning to recognize those members that we have lost over the last month as part of our cancellation protocol. So I'll ask for a moment of silence for those members that we have lost. Okay, thank you. On behalf of council, I extend our condolences to those affected by loss. So we have two members of council today that are not able to join us. That is Troy Thompson as well as Dennis Josie. One of them is sick today, and the other one had a prior commitment that he was unable to get out of. So if I could have a motion to accept the agenda as presented. Tim, second by Steve. All in favor? All right, thank you. So this morning's meeting, we have allotted about 2 hours of time, depending on the dialogue. We'd like to keep to that. I know that it is a Saturday morning, and everybody probably has some plans later this afternoon, so we'll do our best to keep within that time period. We ask that personal issues not be dealt with in this public forum. Issues that are of private nature, we'll take them back and have a dialogue with council one-on-one. So that if there are personal issues, we ask that you please refrain from them. As a chairperson, if I feel that we're going in that avenue, I will ask that we discontinue that discussion. As well, for questions or addressing council, we ask that you please raise your hand. I'll make a list of speakers as we go through the meeting, and then we'll call upon you as your turn comes. As your turn comes to ask the question or address the council. We ask that you please keep the questions and comments relevant to the presentation or discussion which is happening. There is a section at the end of the meeting that we can discuss a business from the floor, which are matters of general interest to the community. As well, if there are any issues that we have that are brought forward that we cannot answer or address at the council meeting, we will take note of it and report it back at the next general meeting. Again, these meetings are being recorded. They are for the members only attendance. So those are our rules of order for today's meeting. So we're going to go through the follow-up action items from August 24th, which are in the packages which have been distributed to you. So one of the follow-up items was that education portfolio confirm safety of the access to school playground equipment. Chief Jacobs and Chief Adams Phillips would speak to that briefly.
Yes, since when the concern was first brought up at the AMS school, there's been that was addressed immediately when to make the adjustments, and there have been some other improvements also that have been kept to standard. So if there are any further concerns or anything like that, please bring them to our attention and we'll address them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as a follow-up, a community member regarding a declaration of citizenship for work purposes and requested for information about council work on border issues. So I believe we'll provide an update on that later on in the agenda. That's fine with the portfolio. Okay. Housing application process. There was a question regarding the process. Housing portfolio is following up on that request, so that will be reported next month's meeting. Community member requested a copy of the presentation to council regarding natural gas pipeline. So that is being made available at that has been made available at the general meeting. Is that just this general meeting thing?
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah, okay. As well, the update on the Governor Corridor environmental assessment. So the environmental assessment report is now complete. Request regarding the status of that. I think that's all of the follow-up items from the last meeting. Okay. All right, so we will now begin with the first presentation we had this morning. It's a presentation on the proposed tobacco pilot project. I will ask Jim Ransom to come forward, the Director of Data Denawago, who is leading the pilot project.
Good morning. You can go to the first slide, to the next slide. This is the current tobacco program that we operate through the Mohawk Council of Watersense. It's called the Ontario First Nation Quota Allocation System. And Ontario, in recognizing the Section 87 right of Indians to get tobacco without provincial excise taxes charged to it, they came up with a system to do that, and it's called the quota allocation system. They basically use a formula that is a lot of it's based on population size, and then they allocate a quantity of cigarettes to each First Nation in Ontario. In our case, for this year, we're allocated almost 146,000 cartons. These are the major brands cigarettes, and we're second largest, so 6 nations gets more than us, but then our community gets it. What's been done in Watersense is that since the beginning there's been a regulatory system in place, and the way the system works, we license retailers in the community to sell cigarettes. They get a permit. They get an allocation amount specific to their store. The allocation is based on the size of the store, the number of employees, the hours of operation. And typically it ranges from 5,000 cartons to 10,000 cartons over a year that they're allocated as part of the permit. If they sell their entire quota, they can come back and request additional cigarettes. And it's been done in the past. The royalty that I'll be talking about is increased once they exceed their allocation and request more. As I mentioned, we're allocated 146,000 cartons. System doesn't work here. Our retailers can't sell their cigarettes, and I'll talk about that. The net result is that even though we could sell 146,000 cartons, our retailers last year sold 40,000 cartons. So it's a tremendous difference between the two. And right now, we have 5 active retail vendors. At last month's meeting, we had 6. So we've lost one in that 1 month time. That's how difficult it is to sell cigarettes. The sales generated $198,000 last year in revenue for MCA, and that's through the 510 royalty that's charged per carton. Got the next slide. As I mentioned, the system's not working. Businesses can't sell their quota. These are the reasons. The mixed traffic corridor designation on Gawanoga is probably the single biggest reason. Having to go through the toll booth makes it challenging for customers. CBSA, having to go through that afterwards makes it challenging. And the issue with both of those is that, as a general rule, Mohawks don't like Canadian cigarettes. So sales are to non-natives. And there's been studies done that province-wide, as much as 80% of sales on reserve are to non-native customers. that's who buys these cigarettes. Here, they can't do that. If they want to buy cigarettes at one of the stores on the island and they're coming from the US, they can't stop. They would have to go through the toll booth, through customs, turn around, come back, go back through the toll booth, go to the store, buy cigarettes, go back through the toll booth, go back through customs. That's $10 in tolls on a carton of cigarettes that they end up paying. So they're not going to do it. If they did it, they would go to the CBSA, and if they found out that the only place they've been is the island, one of the first questions they're asked is, did you buy cigarettes? And the reason they ask that is, under the quota allocation system, non-native are not supposed to be buying these cigarettes. But the province knows that that's not the case, that the majority of sales are to non-native, and they're trying to come up with ways to address that. So these are the issues that affect the sales. The last one is the stores based on the US side of Watersense sell cigarettes much cheaper than are offered on the Canadian side in at-arm sales. If you're buying cigarettes and you're buying them in Cornwall, you may be paying $115 per carton. If you're buying it on the island, you may be paying $85 per carton for the name brands. On the American side, if you go by the stores, you can get rollies for $12. You can get native cigarettes for $26 a carton. You can get the major brands for about, I think, $75, $80 a carton. So all of those things affect sales. If we go to the next slide. This graph shows that this is, it starts in 2010-11, it peaked shortly thereafter. It's been a steady decline since then. And that's because of the factors that I mentioned. The next slide. Since 2012-2013, we've been doing a pilot project to try to change this. In the process, we're trying to change the relationship with Ontario, consistent with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report that calls for a new relationship between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canada. In the process, we created our own tobacco law. It passed in June of last year, and under the UNDRIP, that's what UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, calls for. That Indigenous people need to be able to self-govern and self-regulate. And nation states, provinces included, need to recognize that. We generate our own source revenue from the sales, and council's always said, whatever's generated in Watersense stays in Watersense. And the province has recognized that. One thing we're working on is the ability to trade our quota with other First Nation communities. They're better situated. They don't have to go through customs. They don't have to go through a toll booth. If we can trade with them legally, then that would allow us to sell our quota. The next slide. There are two pilot projects in Ontario. Ours is one, Chippewas of the Thames is the other, near London, Ontario. And based on the work that we've both done, the province has come back and in February made a proposal to all First Nations in Ontario. And this is a short summary of it. They're asking that all First Nations develop their own regulatory systems, which is what we've done here, and they'll recognize it. They're saying that if a First Nation charges a royalty, they'll recognize that and they won't try to make any claims to it. They've added an incentive to it, and that's that if you raise your royalty to 80% of the provincial tax on tobacco, those share a percentage of all tobacco revenue in the province. In this case, they make $1.2 billion off tobacco sales in Ontario. They're prepared to give 10% of that to First Nations. That's $120 million. For Opiate Addiction, we've estimated our share would be $7.2 million annually that they would provide if we increase our royalty to what they're asking. The next slide. What does the offer mean? First, it's unprecedented in Canada. Other provinces have agreements with First Nations in their province. Most of the agreements are that the First Nation collects the equivalent of the provincial sales tax, and then they give it to the province, and then the province gives back part of it to them. What's been offered here is totally different from that. We've only found 2 other jurisdictions in North America that's offering anything close to what Ontario is offering. I forget the states in the United States that are doing that. Under their offer, Ontario recognizes our jurisdiction over tobacco on reserve, and we get to keep the own source revenue without interference from Ontario. The revenue sharing that they're prepared to provide helps to compensate. When you increase your prices, it affects sales and there's less sales. So this will help to address that and allow us to move away from a tobacco-based economy. The next slide. How we would accomplish this is what we're trying to work on at this point. What we've proposed is that with our existing vendors, we would increase the 5.10 per carton to 15. And we would then turn around and subsidize those store owners back 10 of it. So the net effect is no change for them. The proposal that we're making on this is consistent with what other tribes, with what tribes have done in the United States, in particular the state of Washington. That's how they run their system. The tribal vendors collect the equivalent of the state tax and then remit back a portion to the store owners. So it minimizes the economic harm to them. We propose this model. If we did this, Ontario would legalize sales to non-natives, and we're proposing that there be a 5-carton daily maximum to control that process. It would also involve us getting CBSA to leave customers alone once they purchase cigarettes and go through. And it would make it much easier. The problem CBSA has right now is the major brand cigarettes that are sold on reserve have the federal excise tax built into the price. So when that carton of cigarettes goes through customs, our CMP has no interest because the tax has been paid. So that means it's only the province that they could turn to that might have an issue. We come up with this agreement, the province wouldn't have any issue, and therefore if CBSA stops someone, they have no charges to lay. They can't do it themselves, and they would have to let them go through. The question, this is the next one. That would address the existing vendors and sales in the community. It would keep the price point where it is. It would keep those stores operating. It would legalize sales to non-natives and hopefully increase sales for them. We're proposing, in addition to this, to get to what the province wants, the royalty that's 80% of off reserve. We would open a store in Hamilton Island. That location, people don't have to go through the border, don't have to go through the toll booth, and deal with CBSA, deal with the toll booth issues. The cigarettes would retail for $95 a carton, $10 more than on reserve. but still $20 less than off-reserve. And there would be a $25 royalty collected from those sales, and there would be no rebate of that amount. The province would agree that sales to non-natives would be legal, so there would be no policing issues with those sales. The most important point is the price point triggers the revenue sharing. It gets the $7.2 million to the community. And the issue becomes a question of who operates the store. And that's the discussion we're having right now. The next slide. We're trying to figure out what are the concerns. The number one is we don't want to harm our existing vendors. They're having a hard enough time as it is. We're there to support them, and we want to make this work for them. We know the present system doesn't work, so we're trying to fix it so it will work for them to make money, for MCA to make money, and for the community to benefit. We also want to benefit all businesses in the community, particularly from the additional revenue that will come in. And we also want to wisely spend the additional tobacco revenue. I gave you a second handout. It's a one page, and if you look at the bottom, it says community responsibility. When we passed the tobacco law last year, 5.2 said this is how you can spend the revenue. So to address that question, it's already in writing, passed by the community about how tobacco revenue should be spent in the community. It's very broad. Support health, safety, well-being, language, cultural heritage, education, emergency disaster relief, social needs, recreational programs, affecting rights, justice, security, protection, natural environment, development, investment in facilities, and acquiring land. So it's pretty broad, and it's been identified. So it gives some certainty to how that revenue will be spent. The next slide. When we met with some of the vendors, these were some of the concerns they identified to us. How would MCA spend the $7.2 million? That's why I mentioned it's already spelled out how it should be spent, and if we stick to that, then it's transparent, it's open. The economic impact on existing vendors at the Hamilton Island store is open. Some of them believe that their sales will drop because of it, and they're looking for some type of compensation if that occurs. We recognize that, and we're willing to have that discussion with them. There was a comment made that government should not be operating business, and they also said that they want a say in decisions that affect them. All of this is workable, and something we're prepared to sit down and have discussions with. The next slide. They had some ideas on how to make this work, and the first one is create a summer student intern program for businesses. They feel that if we were able to get youth to work for them during the summertime, it gives them help and it gives experience to the youth in working in a business environment. We like that idea. Compensate vendors for any losses. We're willing to have that discussion, as I said. They're asking us to create a capital fund program. On reserve, it's hard to get a business loan because you have no collateral that you can use against that business loan. And they're proposing that we set up a program that addresses that issue specifically. And then finally, providing grants for businesses to reduce their utility, their operating costs. And you could do this by funding replacement of lights with LED lights. If they have coolers, putting in new coolers that are more energy efficient, upgrades to windows, doors, insulation in the building that would improve energy efficiency. and there could be substantial savings on these costs, 30 to 40%, we believe. The next slide. These are the next steps. We're trying to get support for the proposal from vendors, businesses, and the community. The process that we would have to follow with Ontario is we would have to negotiate an agreement in principle that would set out what's going to be in the final agreement. We would then have to charge the higher royalty on existing vendors. We would open the convenience store and charge the higher royalty there. And then the revenue sharing component would kick in to 7.2 million. All of this we're running out of time to accomplish. Ontario, the proposal's coming from the current Ontario government. In January, February, they're going to start going into election mode. And once they go into that phase for election next June, July, we don't think this proposal will be on the table. So we have to decide as a community, is this something we want to pursue? We have 3 months to decide that. The reason it's an issue is in order for them to share part of all of the tobacco revenue in the province, they have to do it by legislation. So to introduce a bill, get it passed that would allow for that allocation to First Nations will take time. If it's not done by the end of this year, I think it's going to be very difficult to get done at all. So that's the challenges we face in this, but it starts first with the community and is this a direction you want us to continue with? And that's why we've been presenting at the last 3 general meetings on this. I think that's the last slide. I'll take questions, comments.
Go ahead.
On your third slide, you had a bar chart.
Yes.
It only started at 2010.
Yes.
Could you provide another bar chart
That goes back before that?
from 2000 to 2009?
We could.
To show, well, I think you should because your information is incomplete. This only represents what happened after the CBSA had left the island.
Yes.
Prior to that, would be interested to see your sales based on that.
Yeah, we can do that and we will, but I can say that I think this was the highest sales ever, and that historically we never sold the entire quota.
I'd like to differ on that.
So,
Prior to 2009, if you look at and get the extra information.
I'll be happy to do that.
Sure. Thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
One of the slides you said to create a summer student intern program.
Yes.
So how do you think summer students, which I assume are still being in high school, because that's where most of them come from, selling cigarettes or being in an environment like that?
Yes.
So
the program, there's only 5 stores that sell cigarettes. We have over 100 businesses in the community. There will be opportunities to work within those 100 businesses. And we can put in place rules and regulations that say if you have someone under the age of 18 that can't sell cigarettes, so you can put in place a process that addresses that directly. But the opportunity with over 100 businesses is, if you don't want to be in that environment, you can offer other businesses that could use help.
But this is only in Ontario, right?
For the program we would create?
Well, for the convenience stores that you have, the convenience.
We have one in Snai, one in St. Regis.
But this is Ontario you're talking about.
Yes.
So Ontario legislates over the Quebec portion of Watersense?
We legislate over the Quebec portion of Watersense. So we would make the rules, we would make the regulations as the Aquasasna community.
What you need the province of Ontario to legalize it, like you said, it has to go through legislation.
To get the funding to Watersense. So this is not unprecedented. Ontario Lottery Gaming, OLG provides $4 million to Watersense.
Yeah.
We spend that in Quebec, even though it's based in Ontario. The Hydro One shares that are on the table right now, that's available to all of Watersense. We have agreements with Quebec that are vice versa. That we have a Quebec fund, $3.29 million for economic development, and we make it available for businesses in Ontario. Council's done a really good job in getting the provincial governments to recognize we're one community, even though we're in two provinces, and to the point where we're allowed to spend Quebec money in Ontario, Ontario money in Quebec. We're the only First Nation in Ontario, Quebec that has that.
So in your opinion, you feel this will not affect or jeopardize any of the Quebec programs?
If anything, this will give us the ability to sit down with Quebec and come to a similar agreement with them and to be able to trade with First Nations in Quebec.
But the question addressed was, will it compromise the Quebec programs?
I do not believe it will.
So you're not sure?
I'm pretty sure.
So that's a yes?
Yes, they will not.
Okay.
Isn't that reflective generally of all sales in Canada? In 1981, was 64 billion sales of cigarettes, and then in 2014, it's only 29 billion individual sales of cigarettes.
Yes.
Like, it's declining.
Yep, I agree with you totally. Our objective in doing this project is to manage the program, but to prepare us to move our economy away from it, because internationally, cigarettes are being legislated on existing. It's just a matter of time, and what's happening is all of the developed countries are putting in place the restrictions, the regulations to do away with it, and so the market is the third world countries.
Right.
And so eventually it's going to be a matter of time before they're no longer the market. And so if we can transition away from that while managing it, then it prepares us for that future. And that's what we're trying to do.
Some people are living there.
Pardon?
World here. If you told some officers that there is people here that live in the third world.
Yes. And the 7.2 million gives us the ability to start addressing that. That's why we're pursuing this. And if increased revenue on top of that gives us more money to address the issues that are here, then that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Did somebody create a backbone of MCA?
Yes, community. It was passed by referendum in June of 2016.
Who gives you that holiday?
The membership does.
In your second handout, you indicated 5.0.
5.2.
5.2.
Yes.
You have section E, assisting in meeting the social needs of members. I think going back to the other community members' statement, you should be doing that today with the revenue you currently have, at least show some demonstration. Has it been?
The 200,000 that we generate right now goes to the arena.
So
it meets the recreational needs, it doesn't, and quasi meets the social needs, but the focus is more on recreational. We just don't have the money to do what's in there.
It was your department's opinion that recreational programs was more priority versus social media to spend $200,000?
That's not quite right.
Could you elaborate?
The arena's been there for 20 years, and it consistently operates as a deficit program. Council is tasked with making up that difference. the tobacco revenue helps us reduce that deficit. And if it didn't come from tobacco, it would have to come from someplace else. So in this case, it helps reduce a larger deficit and makes it smaller.
So 5.2 is currently all in essence, it's in effect right now.
It's in effect, but we don't have a big enough revenue stream coming in for it to make a significant difference. And we want to change that.
So could you provide a report on 5.2 for the community to see from, let's say, 2000 to present? So it gives us a better picture to look at before the customs issue, after the customs issue, and it gives us an opportunity to see where the money was actually applied to in 5.2.
Okay, this law is only 1 year old, so this would only cover from June of 2016 forward.
So where was the money spent in the previous?
I can say that since I've been here, since 2012, it's been illegal.
Prior to that, I think it went to the Justice Program.
Okay. And was there any MCRs that were passed to indicate additional programs?
There may have been some historical ones, but it's generally been an accounting exercise where the revenue is identified through the tobacco quota, and then it's allocated based on in the budget. So it used to go into the Justice Program, and like Jim said, that it's been since 2012. I think it's a little bit earlier than that. It went to specific.
So is it fair to say we could request that be included so we could actually see some actual expenditures?
Yeah, we can make a report available of the revenue that we have received from the royalties over the last, say, 10 years and where that money has been allocated. Because the program's actually been in existence for a very long time. It's just that the royalties have been sporadic. Go ahead.
Could you tell me, there was a MCR that was passed in regard to the quota that was supposed to have taken 10 cents and set aside for the youth, or a fund put there for recreation and, I don't know, to go into each district. Could you tell me, like, how much money is there, and is this still being done, or where does these funds went to?
To my knowledge, that's not happening anymore. If it was at some point, I don't know how much it was there or where it went, but we can find out. It may have went into, well, arguably though, the money going into the arena does capture the youth as well. So it's more than 10% or 10 cents per carton now, but we can research and find out exactly if that happened, where it was spent.
Yeah.
Yes, in the back.
I just want to say one thing more on this tobacco thing. Very long time ago, I live on Coal Island, and I've been to these meetings for this pilot project, and I don't think it's going to work. And I'm here today to ask for some petition to stop it. I already see the damage it'll do. You see these factories that have been trying to work with these governments, paying taxes, whatever. If this law passes and they start selling cigarettes, those factories will close. Not only here, probably going to walk it elsewhere. Me, I've been paying my electricity bill with tobacco. I've been raising my kids off tobacco for 30 years. So if they pass this, I don't know what I'm going to do. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? No?
Okay. All right, thank you very much for the presentation. As Jim mentioned, there's been no decision made on this proposal, this pilot project proposal, so that's something that will go back to council to make a final decision on. All right, we're going going to move along on the agenda. So we wanted to provide the community with an update on the upcoming election law. So I'll ask Chelsea Francis, who is the government support manager. She's also a member of the upcoming election law working group, with an update on the current status of the amendments.
Hello everybody, good morning. Now for coming out. As Grand Chief mentioned, my name is Chelsea Francis. I'm the government support manager and I'm also a member of the working task group on the opposition election law. So what we wanted to provide you with today is just a little bit of information on what's happened so far with the election law and some of the things that we've accomplished so far. So we've actually been able to hold two separate phases of the community consultation meetings. The first three, we had one in each district. We've also been able to hold two online Facebook live chats. So this was for anybody who was not able to attend the meetings, but also were able to access Facebook at the time. We had some really good dialogue through those two sessions. We've also, we're in the second phase of the community consultation meetings, and these are something that we decided we would go above and beyond to make sure that we were able to reach as many community members as possible. So we're again holding 3 more in each district. We've already held 1 in each so far, but we're holding a fourth meeting at Gowanoga at the Tri-District Elders. And if you're interested, that meeting is going to be on October 7th at 10 a.m. at the Tri-District Elders. So anybody can attend, it doesn't matter which district you live in. We encourage everybody to be there so that we can get any feedback, any recommendations from the community members. So in previous meetings, we've been able to introduce the working task group as a whole. So like I said, I'm Chelsea, I'm one of the working task group members. We also have the Justice Department Director, Joyce King, Executive Director, Jordan Wapas, and some of our technical team members are council members and also the Chief Electoral Officer. So we have 1 district representative from each district on our technical team members. We have Chief Ryan Jacobs from Ganadago, Chief Connie Lazor from Gisnaine, and Chief Louise Thompson from Gowanoga. So again, please, I really encourage you to attend our final meeting on October 7th at 10 o'clock at the Tri-District Elders. So this is going to be our final meeting. We're going to go into deeper consideration and more talks amongst the working task group on what we've heard so far from the community. So if there's a question that you have, if there's a recommendation you would like to see in the election law, please come to the meeting and tell us. Otherwise, we don't know what you're looking for. So I think that's it. All I have on my end. Question.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention too, can you let the community know about the difference between the intake and considerations of the survey results versus the fact that these consultation meetings are for the actual intake of comments from community members?
Yep. So basically what went out in 2016, there was a survey. And this survey was basically to garner some information on what the community was thinking in terms of the election law. So it gave us a head start on which direction the community wanted to head in. So from those questions that were in the survey, we were able to include those as proposed changes into the current election law. The current election law hasn't changed. We have a draft proposed version that has been brought forth to the community through mail-outs, and we've also had them provided at almost every single meeting that we've had. So community members have been able to look at that. And then the consultation meetings that we've held are actually on discussion of those proposed changes, which came from the survey. So basically what we're looking for is your feedback on those proposed changes, whether you like them, whether you don't like them, or if there's something else that you'd want to see in there. So that's where your recommendations are really, really important to what actually gets changed and proposed back to the community for a final vote. So the working task group is being facilitated through the comments and the feedback that's coming from the community. And once we get a final draft, it's going to go back to the community for your vote on whether or not you approve of it or if you don't. So I hope that.
There was a question here, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Did you say that the community representatives were the chiefs?
No. They're our technical advisors. Yeah, so they're representative on the committee because the current election law calls for that. So they're there as...
Conflict of interest?
It is, but because the way the current election law that's in effect right now, that's what's written in it. We have to follow what's in law. So they don't have voting abilities. The working task group members, myself, the government support manager, the Justice Department director, and the executive director are the only three with actual voting powers, abilities.
But you're all employees.
Yes.
They should go to the community, but you can't.
Yep, that's why we're having these community consultation meetings.
But you should have membership on there.
The way that the current law is written, we can't include outside community members because the law only says that we can include those people who are listed.
Good, Sonny.
So, in response to that, normally the Legislative Commission would take care of the development and the amendment of any of our community laws. However, that Legislative Commission is not in place. We are currently working on getting the commission filled, the seats filled, and it's all community members. So once that is done, then the laws will be put to their attention to be reviewed, developed, and whatever else needs to be done with our community laws will belong in their hands. But at the time when the request was made to review the election law, the Legislative Commission did not exist.
Yes, over here.
So the executive director, is he a community member?
No, he's not.
So it shouldn't be said in a public meeting that it's community members that are sitting on here.
They're in their capacity of their position, not as members.
Okay, well, that's what should have been said, not as community members.
Yes. Right here?
I was just going to say, I hope the revisions in your election law include this that's going on here.
Yes, we have said from the beginning that the process in which we're using is not ideal. Unfortunately, it's for what is prescribed in the law. So that is the process we're using. And it's something that, that as we move forward and the amendments are proposed, that we'll be looking to make sure it doesn't happen again. The other thing too that's important to note is that, excuse me, there are about 5 fundamental changes to the law. They're all proposed. It's not a take all or leave it approach. So if the community is not comfortable with, one of the recommendations, we need to hear that. It doesn't mean that they're all going forward and it's not happening. So the working task group, based on what the community says, will take all that information and make those recommendations. If 4 of those recommendations, community feels it's not appropriate or that we shouldn't do that, then maybe only 1 may come forward. So it's not a take it all, leave it approach. Those are the recommended changes. It doesn't mean that they're going to happen. Any other questions on the trust and election law?
Just one more.
Yep.
The current issue at hand, which creates this conundrum, is that one of the 4 or 5 proposed changes?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for the update on that. Here, we wanted to provide an update on the Hydro One equity participation. So over the last several months, we have been doing a presentation to the community on a proposal that was put forward to the chiefs in Ontario collectively. Around June, the chiefs of Ontario and Payment Council provided a presentation on a proposed sovereign wealth presentation. Following that presentation to council, there was 3 general meeting presentations done by myself specifically on this. We hosted 2 focus meetings specifically on this proposal, and we hosted 1 online chat through the Mohawk Council Facebook page. The proposal is that collectively, the Ontario Chiefs, which we are part of, one of the 133 communities in Ontario, would purchase about 14 million shares from the company of Hydro One, and that represents about 2.5% of the company. The proposed deal is that we would purchase those shares at about $18 per share. The market value of the shares is around $340 million. The purchase price would be around $268 million. The province of Ontario will be providing a loan to the Ontario Chiefs collectively for 25 years to buy the 14 million shares. The interest rate in which the province is proposing is that it would be their rate in which they borrow money at plus 0.15%. As well, the province is proposing, as part of the proposed transaction, an initial investment of $45 million to the community. So as we've gone through this presentation a number of times, we have circulated it online as well as done it here in person, that our community was asked whether or not we would participate in this proposal. Now the proposal is coming forth from the Government of Ontario as a way to provide communities with a long-term income similar to that of the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation. We received, as you heard earlier, some money from the Casino Rama. We received about $4 million, very similar through a same arrangement. What it is that the Ontario First Nations receive 1.7% of the gross revenue of all gaming revenue in Ontario. So that money is provided to a corporation in which then distributes the money based on a formula to every community. So our community receives around $4 million for that. So we have done a number of community meeting presentations as well as focus meetings on this. Council has agreed to proceed with the project. Before the project can proceed as a collective in Ontario, 106 First Nations in Ontario have to agree to it first before the province will go ahead. So we have said that we're prepared to proceed, but we will now have to wait for 106 communities across Ontario of the 133 to say that we're prepared to go into it. Because the province has said we will not provide this package to less than 106 communities, because then it doesn't make any sense at that point. So we wanted to provide you with an update on that. If you want additional information, we can share the links with you again. We do have a PowerPoint presentation in which we have done extensively to the community, but we wanted to give you an update tonight, this morning on that. So, are there any questions? Okay. All right. The next item that we're going to provide an update on is the Northern Border Summit. I know that it was touched on last month at the general meeting. There were 3 members of our council that participated in the Northern Border Tribal Summit on August 21st in Minnesota. We were invited by the Saint Small Tribe as well as the tribe of Idaho to discuss border issues as a whole as it relates to tribal nations across the province, across the country of the United States and Canada. So we wanted to provide a bit more detail on that. I'll turn to Public Safety Portfolio Steve Thomas to provide a high-level report on that, and then we can have a bit of dialogue on that.
August 20th, we're invited by the Saint Mohawk Tribe. We're co-hosting the event with the Kootenai Tribe from Idaho. They invited, invitations were widespread. There was 19 First Nations and tribal communities present, from the West Coast right into Wisconsin. These people came in based on the collection that Canada is presently doing. Public Safety Canada has a person that is collecting information from east to west on the impacts of the border on First Nations and tribal communities. All of the issues that were discussed at this conference is exactly what Akwesasne goes through on a daily basis. They're very similar, but in some cases a little more drastic. You have husband and wives that are separated by inadequate documentation, because some of these are very small First Nations. They do not have the internal capabilities to produce these documents, so these people meet once a month to go visit their wives and husbands. That is the impact of this continuing battle with Canada and the United States. we invited, the person that was invited was a Republican senator. His name is Kevin Kramer. He's the co-chair of the Border Caucus Summit at congressional level. He sat through all of the presentations, and when he done his update, he could not believe the impact that these people had put on the table. Having said that, this is a continuing operation of collected information from the AFN, us, our portfolios, Red Chief and I, and other members of council that attend meetings regionally, locally, and internationally to discuss these issues. It's a continuing issue, and we're trying to find legislative changes at the Canadian level and the American level in order to facilitate our free crossing of the border. And one of the recommendations from their committee was the recognition of the Jay Treaty by Canada. They were pushing. This battle is not over yet. We will continually gather this information as we move forward. And we will continually consult with the community and update you at all of our meetings, general meetings, focus meetings. From that meeting, we had requested information on what currently is impacting some of our community members that work in New York City on Port Authority jobs. That is Transportation Security Administration. Homeland Security was there. Met this gentleman before. He's a tribal liaison officer. I requested that he contact TSA because I had requested that last year in Buffalo, and nobody called. Before I was even home, I had a message on my phone from the branch manager for TSA. Her name is Stephanie Hamilton. We're going to have a conference called October 18th and 19th in Ottawa with the Iroquois Caucus Committee, which impacts Ganawag, Tyndall, Six Nations, Waka, and Oneida. They will be answering or asking questions on why Indians born in Canada are subjected to the refusal of the Trusted Worker Identification Card on these projects. A few of our community members here were let go this spring because of that, because the documentation does not match what their requirements are. And still, it's all tied in. The Americans recognize the Jay Treaty to a certain extent. And that's what's impacting us on their application process. We have to get a green card from customs in order to apply for this card. That is not where we want to go with this. We want a recognition that First Nations people are guaranteed from historical treaties and documents. So this is an ongoing process. She will be in a conference call on the 18th and 19th. And I spoke with the facilitator, David Porter, at another workshop. He was the facilitator of the Border Summit. Another major impact is the legalization of marijuana by Canada. For them to scrutinize Canadians coming over, it's going to be a while, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, who knows? But we have borders right here. In New York State, this marijuana is illegal. And our own people across the border from St. Regis and St. Hogan'sburg. That is going to be another impact on this community. SNI, we already have enough. Everybody knows we have enough agencies surrounding our community. We don't need any more of this. They're passing legislation regularly that impact this community. And this is what we're at the table discussing with them. I'll give you an example. Beyond the border issue, it's an agreement between Canada and the United States, trade and commerce. Again, the Border Caucus Committee, this is the Senators Committee, there's 34 congressmen sit on this. Pre-clearance agreement, Canada and the United States signed. That's going to have an impact where we live. Cannabis It's an emergency measures continuation of operations plan. That is on both sides of the border. NAFTA, free trade agreement. To a certain point, we will be impacted again because now they're renegotiating because of this new person in the White House. His continuing effort to build a border wall, the Mexican border, which again, we have people on both sides of the border, tribes. We're monitoring that situation also. They've already have issued tenders in 3 different border walls to the White House. So if it happens there, we got to keep this border open up here. We cannot have any more legislation that's going to impact us like this. That is what our continuing effort is, to monitor these situations and to speak with high-level congressmen and premiers within our purview for our community.
Are there any questions? I think that we're on the border discussion. We can go through a bit of some of the updates on the border, specifically to here's what from CBSA in our community. So as you know, as Chief Thomas referenced, the federal government of Canada as well as the United States signed an agreement, which they call a pre-clearance agreement, which allows for U.S. Customs officers to be located in Canadian airports and have the tools to do their job, as well as allows for Canada Customs officers to be in U.S. airports to do their job. And there are economic provisions in there that talk about land crossings as well as airports and rail. So that agreement is the agreement that will pave the way to allow for the Canada Customs in Cornwall to be relocated into Roosevelt. So we have been pushing hard on the government of Canada to make an indication whether or not that is still on the table and whether or not that's going to be a reality. Because we know that the location of the Cornwall Customs is not ideal. There's a huge impact on our community for an array of reasons. So we have gone to the Public Safety Minister and asked him, we've been pushing on CBSA. One of the biggest challenges right now that they're not directly saying, but are saying, is that the immigration policies and the border protection policies of the United States right now are quite different. And that's simply purely because of the position of the U.S. President. So in order for them ideally to locate a customs into the United States is not the opportune time, which is not very good news for us. But the mechanisms are still there to be able to make this happen. We continue to push on the government and ask them whether or not this is going to happen. So as we proceed, we'll continue to keep that pressure on them, as well as the American counterparts, to make this reality, because we all know that keeping the customs where it is not conducive to many things. The other thing is that recently Canada Customs came to our council table and presented a proposed framework for alternative reporting, whereby they would put an electronic reporting station on Cornwall Island, 2 lanes of where individuals would then now report to that electronic reporting station instead of going into the city of Cornwall. That proposal is an unmanned station. It would be a station of two lanes, very similar to the existing now that they have in Cornwall, where the plates would be red. And that information would be transmitted to Cornwall, to the border station itself. And there would be, the technology would be video transmitting there online, and the community members would have to, this is what's being proposed, is that we would have to have a registration system of some sort, because the status cards in which we use now, most of them are not, or actually none of them, except for a few, are machine readable, so we can't, they have to punch it in all manually. And a lot of community members don't have passports. We have said to the government that we need to have machine readable status cards for the purpose of border crossing, They're working on that, but that probably won't happen before this alternative reporting potentially could happen. So what we're looking at is developing a registry system specifically for the alternative reporting on Cornwall Island, whereby the person would provide all the information that is on their status card, and they would be provided with a card specifically for the purpose of the alternative reporting. That is the framework of that. If people are asked to go to secondary inspection, they would have to go to the city of Cornwall. If they are cleared on the line cleared on the line to proceed, they would then turn off on Cornwall Island. That's the high level of that. We just received that presentation in the last month. The plan now is to move that presentation forward with the community to get the feedback from the community of what the thoughts are. Now, it's not, council initially had said that if we go down this avenue, we want assurance that if alternative reporting is put on Cornwall Island, it doesn't mean that the relocation of what to the United States won't happen. So we don't want them to be tied together. That's one thing we want in writing from them. The other thing is that recognizing that this doesn't solve all of the problems, but it does help with the inconvenience of going to Cornwall and then having to go back to Cornwall Island as well. You know, if we have more people reporting on Cornwall Island through an alternative reporting station, it means less people waiting in line, and it means for those that have to go to Cornwall, or those that are reporting, there'll be less people in line and less congestion. So that's the high level of that. I see a question in the back. Go ahead.
The whole thing with order and toll and customs and all that doesn't affect the whole community. Affects Roanoke members the most. And I understand, I'm not sure your name, I understand your concern that you're afraid of going to new borders here from Snyder. Okay, well, we already do that on the island. And I wish more of my friends would show up, because I went to community members in Roanoke, and I said, why can't we move the toll booth in American Bridges? Because we made it, and we would accept the customs. I think we already accepted some of this. So if you move the toll booth, I think we will get business. Our stores will start to increase. We will get revenue. If we can move that toll booth to the American side, then they do the American Bridge. That will be an answer to a lot of issues. And there's still good issues there. But like I said, some of us have come to accept that the customs is going to stay there. I didn't know how racist they were until they moved it, because I never used the customs when they were on the island. I always traveled by boat. So when they moved there, I feel what the rest of the community went through. A lot of racism there. And I don't know why we don't get it right on and we're always MCA. I feel like they're. Well, what do you want us to do? Can we do this? Well, you represent the Canadian government. You don't represent Opposition. Because Opposition is speaking and we don't get nowhere. So I think that an answer to our issues as far as bringing, I don't know what you call it, business to Roanoke would be to move the toll booth. I think we would get people from Cornwall come over and buy these Mexican cigarettes, crafts from my mother, crafts from your cousin. I think that would, for us members that live there, that would help out a lot. And if you're listening, and that for the members that do live there, they know that would relieve us a lot. I live there. And yeah. So that could be an idea for you guys that are sitting at that table, take into consideration. That would be greatly appreciated by the members of Illinois. I'm sure that's talking us. Thank you.
No, absolutely. We have been pushing hard on Transport Canada, who is responsible for the toll location. We've been pushing hard on the Federal Bridge Corporation for the location of the toll. They're actually undertaking now to start looking at a feasibility study to relocate the toll. One of the things that is happening, though, is that there are individuals that continue to drive in the opposite direction of the toll location straight into the city of Cornwall, which is a huge hazard to our people. But at the same time, it's placing a lot of the workers at risk for what is happening. So the toll now is saying, you know, maybe we were not in the right location. But for this purpose, it's a bad thing that is happening. But at the same time, they're saying maybe we need to be somewhere else. So the government, we met a couple of weeks ago with Transport Canada, and they said that we're going to begin looking at a study to look at how we can, where the best location is of the toll booth. The American side, we have had meetings with the American partner because this bridge on Cornwall Island has an American partner and a Canadian partner because it's international. And we have put that to them as well, is that there's a huge economic impact on the toll location. There's a huge social impact on the toll location, because if you want people to come and visit, whether it be for commerce or social events, it's a $7 pop regardless. And that's not conducive to very much of anything.
And not only that, I don't understand, and I don't know how to word it, but it's also a thing that impresses us, or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The location of the customs and the toll continue to compound us. I can tell you that it's a priority for council. The Galway chiefs have said exactly what you have said to council, that these are pressing issues, and we'll continue to move them forward. And we'll continue to provide that update to the community as we move this forward. Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay. All right, so we wanted to have a preliminary discussion this morning with you about the cannabis legislation that's being proposed. You may or may not be aware, but the federal government has said that they they have introduced legislation into the House of Commons for the regulation of cannabis through the country. The province of Ontario has responded that they are moving towards providing regulations. The provinces, as we understand it, is that the provinces and territories would license and oversee the distribution and sale of cannabis. The federal government would share the responsibility for overseeing the new system, as well as that the current program for accessing cannabis for medical purposes will not be affected. So we as council have identified a working group to go out and collect the information on what the provinces are saying, what the federal government is saying, as well to go to the community and start having this conversation what the community thinks we should do about the proposed regulations to allow for cannabis to be sold to the community. One of the things, though, that we have said amongst council is that we really should look at what are the economic opportunities as well to the sale and distribution of cannabis. Because as you've heard earlier, there's a regime that already exists for tobacco. Perhaps there's some opportunity with cannabis, but the federal government has said that by July of 2018 they will have the legislation in place. The provinces are still trying to catch up as to what that framework will look like. And we want to bring that here this morning to get at least a high level feedback from you. We'll be having more community meetings specifically on this to talk in more depth about it. But one of the things that I have said to council is that perhaps we should look at how this is going, what's the economic model, and does it really make any sense for Snai or St. Regis to have distribution? Because the fact is, Snai and St. Regis are landlocked. The only people, if there were to be dispensaries in Snai and St. Regis, the people that they would be selling it to would be our own people, and if there are any other people that they would be selling it to, would be Americans coming from the United States into our community. The problem with that is, and it goes back to our discussion earlier, is that if there's an influx of Americans coming into Snai and St. Regis to buy this product, it's going to bring a lot of attraction to the need to this border not being processed, right? And then there'll be people heading back into Roosevelt Town or back into Messina, back into Fort Covington with a product they bought legally, potentially legally in St. Regis, but it is strictly prohibited at any account in the United States. And I think that's a big reality that our community would face, that no other community would face to the degree in which we would face that. So does that make any sense to have dispensaries over here? I don't know. We want to go to the community and have that discussion. Does it make any sense to have dispensaries at all? Perhaps we should have a dispensary on one of our islands to sell to people that are not from our community and not sell to our community. So we open that up for questions, comments, thoughts, as what your initial thoughts are. But this is something that the governments are pushing forward on, and we don't want to be in a position where people are coming here, exploiting our rights. These things are popping up, and it's really, we're either in a bad position or a bit of a free-for-all. But
should it not go to referendum?
Yeah, so it probably will, potentially, but if we're going towards the regulation, internal regulation, most likely we would have to draft regulation or legislation laws, and those laws in the past have had referendums for approval. So we would have to figure out how we're going to get the approval of the community, but we still need to lay the framework. We could be going to the community to bar it all together, or we could be going to the community and say, well, if there's money to be made collectively for the community, then that's where we should go. We shouldn't be, dispensing it out to everybody over the age of, 18 or 21, whatever. But that's what we need the community to give us feedback as to what, we envision as a community of how we're going to deal with this issue, because it's going to come very fast.
And that would be strictly medicinal, right?
Well, no, we're talking recreational, right? So the medicinal aspect continues to be the same. So those that access it via a doctor prescription and via mail, that system will stay the same. It's the ones that, because basically what Ontario is proposing is that you drive the city of Cornwall, and there will be a place where you can buy marijuana for your personal consumption.
And what kind of security system would be around wherever that building is?
Well, I mean, that's the discussion we're having, but, at some point, it becomes the same security you have around liquor stores and the same security you have around beer stores, right? Because this product is ending up it's opened up, right? So it's decriminalizing it to a certain degree. In the back there?
She was first.
Okay, go ahead.
The Sagres Mohawk tribe is pursuing this, and it's not the same security. You've grown it, you have like 4 or 5 different levels of security for that. Yeah, it's extremely expensive. I mean, I'm not saying it's not something to go into.
Yeah, no, we're not necessarily looking at it as a business. Well, when I say the business aspect, I mean in the regulatory aspect, right? I mean, we're not looking to, at this point, we're not looking to open a dispensary ourselves, we're not looking to grow it ourselves, but the reality is that the rest of the country in Canada is looking to open this stuff up, and we don't want to be in a position where we're reacting after the fact. Yeah.
Isn't there already a group that is ready to start this on the island?
There is an application for a private business to grow the marijuana for the cannabis for the medical purpose. So I've described the doctor, the mail order stuff. That is what's being proposed. No decision has been made on that, nor have they received approval. Yes.
With all that being said, it sounds like you're saying that an individual is going to be able to go ahead and open up a dispensary whether it's business or not.
That's the position we don't want to be in.
So we could put together a committee to regulate this somehow?
Potentially, yes. But that's why we're having that discussion here before we end up in that position. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I just came back from Quebec City, where Quebec, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Youth Protection and on health side, her name is, the minister for that is Lucy Charlotte. She, along with the ministry for Jeff Elliott, but he's also a minister. And there was a presentation made by them. And I'm just going to be reading off some of the elements of the federal bill. The feds are the ones who are going to pass this new bill. It's gone through the second reading and it's going to go to the final reading. I think they said maybe in November. In the federal bill, this is the bill that's going to be passed. It says that the legal age to smoke marijuana in public is 18. And that the possession for adults, if you are stopped by the police and carry 30 grams for adults, that's legal. For minors, it's 5 grams. You can carry up to 5 grams for children. That's a lot. We don't really need to have a plant grow, a manufacturer or a growing plantation for this, because individuals are allowed to grow 4 plants to the height of 1 meter per residence. So again, I say it's because of reserves. I say we're short on housing. I say so. You may have 5 adults living in one place. I say so. Each of those 5 adults can grow up to 4 plants each. So you could have a plantation in your backyard. And the other one is that for production, for mass production, you'll need a permit. Those are just some of the ones.
Okay, you're in the front first, and then we'll go to the back.
Sure. My name is Nathan Rose. I'm a member of... So I'm here today, and basically several other interests have asked me to come and speak and share my experiences in medical cannabis. My grandfather back in the 60s was in your position as Grand Chief over the council board, and it's funny, I recently pulled up an article about him, and basically all of the issues that were raised earlier concerning the border issues, verbatim. I actually want to print this off and provide a copy of this. It's almost verbatim the discussion we had today. Basically, racial prejudice at the border, people's religious rights being violated, ambulances being held up, and people need to have access to medicine. All these things are addressed, and it's like we're stuck in this time loop where we really just can't get a fair deal on the border. Cannabis presents some unique challenges and opportunities for our tribe and for our members. In particular, in Michigan, I'm licensed by the state of Michigan as a medical cannabis provider. We've got a successful business there by the name of Greener Crossing, where we basically provide medical cannabis to about 8,000 patients. Of those patients, 2,500 are veterans, U.S. military veterans. The reason I got into the business, I'm a Marine Corps veteran myself, and I'm also a medical marijuana patient. I have service-related injuries, and basically I'm under treatment by the VA for several ailments, and medical marijuana is actually prescribed to me now by my federal VA doctor. So my card that I possess in Michigan as a patient was actually granted to me through the federal government, which has basically maintained prohibition against medical cannabis. The medical benefits of it are very proven. And what I mean by that is communities that have already legalized access to medical cannabis, and including recreational cannabis, have showed a double-digit decrease in violent crime. Also, a major decrease in traffic, alcohol-related, and under the influence-related accidents. So 2 things that really affect our community now, we will see see a drop in. Also, is anybody here affected by cancer in their family or friends? Drop in violent crime, significant drop in violent crime, double digits, significant drop in alcohol and traffic-related deaths and fatality in areas where medical cannabis is available. And the reason for that is that people choose, once they have access to it, they choose to medicate with other forms rather than trying to self-medicate, say, with alcohol. Our community has a serious opiate addiction problem. You're reading the police blotter every week about arrests and things related to opiate addiction within our community. I can tell you that I have dozens and dozens of friends that are prescribed opiates that basically have come off of their opiates and basically live productive lives, and they're basically important members of the community now because they only treat themselves with medical cannabis. In terms of what I heard earlier today regarding the tobacco revenue sharing proposal, I heard that Ontario government is recognizing our right to self-government, that they're recognizing our right to trade, that the First Nations develop regulatory regime, which the province will recognize and leave alone. When I look at the tobacco opportunity, it's like a shot in the dark, but it's like a one bite at the apple chance. It's like we have a few months to get this accomplished. But if we're able to get this accomplished and tap into that revenue, I look at this as almost a framework for cannabis and how it can benefit our community from an economic standpoint. Not even all the medical and other benefits that I can share with you. When I read into this closely, I listened to a gentleman share a story about he's raised his family off of tobacco for the last 30 years, and he may lose his ability to support his family. I heard a gentleman give an example about two stores, retailers that had to close that retail tobacco. I heard about cigarette factories closing and dozens of people losing their jobs because we are getting regulated out of that business, okay? I watch ships go by and I see billions of dollars in commerce cut right through our reservation, and we don't profit a penny from that. So what are our options when it comes to cannabis? Well, just like if Ontario's recognizing our right to self-govern when it comes to tobacco, we have a unique opportunity now to get out in front of this and put something in place that literally gives us the right from a commercial but also as an individual. All the reefer madness concerns about security and things like that, I promise you can all be addressed. California's been doing this since 1998, Colorado, Oregon, you can read the headlines. No one's getting broken into and having their products stolen. These issues don't exist. It's really no different than the pharmaceutical interest or a pharmacy. A pharmacy is more likely to get broken into, to have oxycodone broken into, than a marijuana dispensary broken into, to have marijuana tape. It's got a greater street value. Marijuana has basically come above a lot of these problems in the last couple of years. So when I talk about revenue, and Michigan has two different revenue models. So I got into the business, I started as a caregiver. As a caregiver, I have 5 patients, and I'm basically allowed to provide medicine for those 5 patients. And that framework only allows transfers to happen between a caregiver and his patients. That means I cannot sell that product to anybody else. Now, with commercialization, the reason I believe that is it's an important statement for everyone to understand is that it gives the individuals, all the members of the community, the opportunity to participate in the business. I started my home in the basement of my home, and basically I moved up into my pole barn, and from my pole barn I went and basically applied for commercial licensing. The reality is that less than 3% of the people that get into growing cannabis are actually good at it. When I mean good at it, can provide something that would be considered to be of medical quality. 50% of the people in the business could produce something that could be considered recreational quality. But the reality is that if most of the people that get into the business that do want to grow and provide medicine for themselves or for a family member, struggle because it isn't simple. There is a lot required in order to basically maintain and basically cultivate this plant into something that can be considered consumable for medical reasons. as a result, what happens is a lot of people get into this business and they find out that it's very difficult to obtain their medicine from their caregiver because their caregiver is not very good at cultivating medical cannabis. So even though they possess a card and a license to get that medicine, they literally do not have access to it because their caregiver isn't able to provide on a consistent basis. So this caused the Michigan legislature to say, well, we should consider bringing some commercial opportunities in here. The commercial opportunities don't necessarily take away any of the opportunity from the small individual grower, but what they do is they provide people with a higher level of expertise and basically resources to come in and build something that can provide a more consistent medical product. In Michigan now, they're allowing both of these to contribute into the same distribution system, if you will. So what I'm suggesting is that we consider, if we are going to move forward on this in the community, that we consider allowing members to participate economically, allowing people to have their small grow on their own property, and to provide their output to a regulated distribution point. And that distribution point, I heard all these retailers have to close their doors because they're losing tobacco revenue. I can tell you this, tobacco revenue is expected to drop by 32% in the next 3 years because it's losing ground to cannabis, okay? So a community that relies so heavily on revenue from tobacco, we really owe it to ourselves to take a closer look to this and not pass judgment and to basically hold off on some of these fears we have to see how they can be addressed, because there are massive economic opportunities. I'm tired of seeing our community here lose out on these economic opportunities. I would just like us to take a step back before we pass any judgment and really take a close look at how this can benefit us from a medical standpoint, from an economic standpoint, and then eventually, if we get that right, everybody can benefit from the recreational side of it. That's it. Thank you very much. The back.
Oh, you answered.
Yes, you said it right, I didn't think you said right. So what this group is, working group that we're putting together is, we want to do it right in order to move forward on this. We don't want black market coming into play here. We want the full benefit of the medical marijuana to the medical patients. It's got to go that way. We don't want anarchy, and that's the way we have to control it, to actually profit from, or even to move forward on this, because it is coming. You know, and we have to be ready. And I think that's the whole object of this working group that we're putting together, is to prepare us for this. Because it's not going to go away. It keeps coming up every elections for federal governments, United States governments. We have to be ready. But we also have to be ready on the grounds of the jurisdiction and right here we have within our possession, the border issues. So we got a lot of work ahead of us. You know, it's going to take a while to get it done, but we only got a year to do it. You know, the medical part, I understand all the medical part that you're talking about. There's a lot of benefits there, but if you're not getting the right stuff for your illnesses, and then you're wasting your money.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And you're causing something. There's all kinds of conditions in what the federal government wants to do. I don't agree to a lot of that stuff. I don't agree putting it into gummy bears. I don't agree to put it into brownies, just because you're making it attractive for our kids to get a hold of all that stuff. It's just like the bathroom. You're trying to have warning signs, you gotta do all this and that, you have to be prepared. All right, so this working group, big task ahead of them, and that's what we're trying to do. I'm part of the task group, and you know, and I agree with the 5 people because of our housing situation, where we're overloaded in our houses, or how would you say that, too many people overcrowding in our homes. So each individual over there is going to be allowed to grow 4 plants, and yes, there'll be small plantations popping up here and there, but we also have to work with them also so that we can funnel that someplace, so that it doesn't just go to anybody they want to give it to. You know, recreationally, there's issues here. Medically, we have issues, but that's already being taken care of because the licenses and the federal regulations behind medical marijuana. But the recreational part, that's where we have to grasp it and get it done right.
And I heard your comments earlier, you know, about in Ottawa just last week, they decided they were going to drop the age to 18. And the main reason being is the reason they dropped the age is they're concerned about the black market. That Well, if we make it 21, like other states in the United States, then what happens is those kids that are in that adolescence, 21-year age, go to the black market. And they found that by dropping it to 18, they can eliminate the majority of the black market issues. I can tell you in Michigan, marijuana, the price of marijuana has dropped so low that it's eliminating the majority of the black market. They make no money. The retailers there's plenty of profit for a retailer, they make profit for a grower. But the margin's not there that these Mexican cartels and other people had to smuggle it long distances. I think that's good because it reduces crime overall for everybody.
That's the same insight the federal government has.
Okay. We'll go to Louise and then back to the back here.
I'll let the judge.
I was just gonna say, if you do go this route, like me, I was born here, raised here, and all my life I always told me, stay away from this. So now I'm confused the last month or so when coming to these meetings because I'm getting pulled in a direction that I was not my whole life to stay away from. So this is new to me, I don't know. So if you are saying that you are going to go ahead and allow certain, however you handpick them or anybody can open up these shops, who's going to be their supplier? You're saying, yeah, okay, we don't want this stuff coming in from Colombia or Montreal or whatever, so you're going to need your own organic suppliers. And if you're going to be willing to do this and let people do this, it's going to explode. You're going to need mass producers.
Yeah, no,
in our community, not outside, not.
Yeah, this is, there is no determination one way or the other on this, I can tell you that right now. So whether or not we're going to allow for this, or whether or not it'll be regulated, whether or not to be, based on recreational or economic, but we just want to be ahead of the curve on this. And yes, exactly what you said with all the others, absolutely, that's a huge component. That's why we formed a working committee to go out and start talking with the community and start looking at what this is going to look like. But we need to do it now because we don't want to be in a position where we lose an opportunity or we're in a compromising position where it's out of control. Up here.
My name is Wendell Oaks. I'm a medical marijuana caregiver. I'm also a patient. I suffer from arthritis and peripheral neuropathy because I'm a pre-diabetic. So I kind of watch my diet and I use gummy bears. I take a small piece of gummy bear every night to help my arthritis pain, my neuropathy pain. I sleep like a baby all night long. So that's just one example of many that I could give you. I'm sure there's people in this community that are suffering from dementia, anxiety, PTSD, high blood pressure, things of that nature. Cannabis does help some of the pain, a lot of the pain. It's great for chronic pain. But to shift gears a little bit, I think we know the medical part of it. I stopped in Tanganega to top off. There's eight dispensaries in Tanganega already. So
those are lining up in Toronto.
We're a little bit behind the eight ball here. But don't quote me on these numbers, but I think the medical marijuana business is a $250 billion business in the U.S. It's going to double next year to $500 billion. There's big money on the sidelines. I mean, investors like Warren Buffett, those guys, they're bringing big money in. There's big pharma that's trying to control the regulations. We see it in our state where I live. So I just wanted to give you, some of the things, give you some ideas, some of the things that are going on. We're a family-owned business. We're expanding our business in Michigan. When I was in college, I did smoke marijuana. When I got hired by GM, I worked 30 years for GM. Never smoked it because I was was drug tested every so often. But marijuana's come a long way since way back then and now. It's very, you can put regulations in place that control it, and so that it doesn't get back in the community. You're not going to be able to prevent kids from using it 100%, but you can control what you sell. So that's basically my take on it, and I'm grateful to be back home. Thank you.
Okay, like I mentioned earlier, that I've been attending these meetings that's been hosted by the provinces. I've attended a meeting in Ontario, and I attended 2 in Quebec. The last meetings that I've attended, there were over 100 First Nation people in attendance, and they came from all areas of Ontario, meaning the Inuit, the north, south, east, and west of Ontario, or Quebec, came to these meetings. And not one of them, not one of those communities that are represented there agreed. They did not, they all kind of objected to this happening in their community. And that's on the recreation of marijuana. Because a lot of these government people that were there, when they asked them questions about the impacts on the health of people, especially the people who are still in the growing stage, the only thing that they said that from the time the people, children, or an individual is born up to the age of 25, their brain is still developing. And that's where they haven't really completed their studies on what the effects are. I says, well, what about, I mean, that's that. Well, what about the effects on the growing fetus? You know, a young girl smokes her cigarettes every day, and what kind of medical study has been done on we all know the effects of people smoking cigarettes when they're pregnant. We all know that there's complications with that. We all know that the complications associated with alcohol when you're pregnant. So there definitely has to be complications from the growing fetus on recreational marijuana, because recreational marijuana it's not really controlled with THC in there and other things. So for the people there, like I said, they kind of rejected the application of whatever kind of provincial laws that are being placed. They said, no, you keep your laws on the outside. We don't even want the privilege of smoking. Because the other thing they said that who's educating our people on the effects of marijuana? The other one, who's going to take care of the people once the side effects kick in? Who's going to enforce the laws? Who's going to enforce the control of this? And the other one is that the studies have not been completed. The Native people that were there already complained to the government. They says, right now, this isn't even in place, and you're not even providing enough funding to keep our police forces equal with the outside. So they said we're not allowing the outside enforcement agencies into our community, so you better provide the money to ensure that our police forces and our health services and our education programs and our hospitals or clinics are well equipped with the effects of legalizing marijuana.
Thank you. Here, and then we're going to wrap up.
All valid points. The reason that the studies don't exist is because it's been federal prohibition is prevented. So let's say that a university or college in New York State would like to do a study on it to find out what the effects are. They've been prevented for 70 years. It's a plant, and it's safe use. There's never been a case where anybody has overdosed on marijuana, unless somebody can prove me otherwise. But I wanted to share with you, the effects of alcohol and tobacco are already proven. The medical data exists already. We literally promote the sale of them in our community. So to think about it, we know there's medical benefits to this. So I agree with you that there is data today that shows the effect on juvenile development, and that I do believe it should be kept from children. I believe that if you're over the age of 18, there might be medical benefits to it. The medical benefits are proven. I'm not a big promoter of the recreational aspect of it, but I am a promoter of individual rights. I fought for the United States as a U.S. Marine because I believed in what our constitutional rights are when it comes to our individual freedoms. Same thing when it comes to property. I know our tribal lands, we do not want to be told what we can and can't do with our lands. And as individuals, we should have certain rights in what we're able to do with our lands, as long as we're not harming other people's. I really think that the prohibition and a lot of these fears that are being brought forth by interests that basically don't want to see our communities benefit from it. I can tell you that the pharmaceutical industry has spent over $30 million in the state of Michigan hiring lobbyists to stop medical marijuana. They have failed. And because medical marijuana, now Michigan is the second largest market with the second largest number of medical patients in the United States. As my father stated, it's actually going to double in revenue this year. And there are no instances of medical issues. You might hear about the occasional person that medicated and decided they're going to go out and drive their vehicle. Those are far and few between, and those are always the instances that the news takes to try and highlight it. But there's also dozens and dozens of instances of children that are suffering from epilepsy. I know we've all seen the videos.
Like Ranching said, that the task force is going to review all this.
Yeah.
And like task force is going to be bringing forward that right now it is legal to buy and consume alcohol. In Alcazar, that's illegal. You cannot buy alcohol in Alcazar. You can drink it in your home, but you cannot buy it in Alcazar. So that's the collective. The individual is when you go into your home. You have that right. So no, this is what the task force will be looking at, and a lot of it will be from we can only look at the data and the resources that's on the page. We cannot go into.
I have one question about the task force. Is there a law enforcement person on the task force board?
No, not as right now, but it can be expanded.
Yeah, that'd be great to see that, because I really think that's important. In my experience, we've been trying to work closely with law enforcement. It's the same thing, when you're a hammer, you tend to look for a nail. Law enforcement needs to be brought into these discussions so they can be educated throughout the process. And we've been trying to interlock local law enforcement with law enforcement in communities where this is already legal, so they can have a dialogue and understand how they can address the policing of it and how they can reduce the cost of it, and by having those relationships.
Thanks so much. Moving over here
just real quick, one, within New York State, the black market, the legal dispensaries cannot keep up with the black market, so it's the total opposite of Michigan. The black market is better price because of the current rules and regulations on it. The other is that, is this issue, is it discussed in the leadership meetings with the tribe?
It hasn't been extensively, but we will be having those discussions very near future. Over here, and then, yeah.
Just one question in regard to the border, alternative reporting. What about the vehicles from California residents that they have two reports and one don't report? Those people.
Are you trying to leave the business from the floor? We don't have that figured out yet, but if the alternative reporting is put in, it still doesn't prohibit people from not reporting at all. So those will continue, that option is still available. But we haven't put that forward yet to say that, okay, we have X amount of vehicles that hadn't reported, we're looking possibly for some sort of amnesty, but we're not sure, right? We haven't explored that yet.
But right now, the system that they displayed, the kiosk where you're gonna be still legally conforming will be on the right side, okay? In that pavement block. So for regular people that have to go to Cornwall, you can still, as a non-reporter, you can still drive on that lane and just go off to the left, the west or south, or west or east.
So if it does come down,
Being non-conformist there?
yes, yes. Anyways, back over here, and then we're going to move on.
Back to the cannabis, the major issue from the First Nations is the lack of resources that they currently hold, because a lot of them are not up to the capacity of what Akwesasne is. Some are complaining that they're losing their police forces next year. So who's going to regulate or who's going to help in that matter? So that's another issue, you know. And then you have the lack of rehabilitation centers, the detox centers themselves, or even the halfway houses, the integration back into society for some of our individuals. So that's another major component, and plus the mental health part of it. So there is a lot of catching up that our First Nations have to do to even typically look at some of these things. So in our area, we're kind of in a good position, but in other areas, they're just getting off the ground.
Our commercial, this is I'm a proponent of bringing in commercial businesses. I've got a study that each commercial license if the tribe issued commercial licenses, each business based on the average revenue of the other Canadian licenses that have been issued would generate $500,000 in Canadian revenue for the tribe. That's each commercial license. So we already have a way of a framework to pay for it. Make the businesses that are going to profit pay for it.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to wrap up the discussion now on the cannabis. We appreciate what has brought forward, all the thoughts, opinions on that. We have not made any decision of where this is going. I do want to say, though, we do not want to be in a position where, because those dispensaries that were mentioned that they have in Mandanega are not operating in accordance or approval by the local council, and there is no collective benefit from those dispensaries. One person owns it, one person's making the profit. Granted, they create jobs, but we know we're in a position where we're not getting collective benefit to everyone, right? And that's why we're having this discussion with the community, and that's where we're going to end up going. We're going to have more community consultation specifically on this, and the committee will be leading that and bringing that back to council for consideration. So, thank you very much for all your comments.
Let them know the committee, the chiefs on that.
Yeah, if I could, the chiefs are on the committee, could you identify yourself? Yeah, and I believe Troy and Ben is also on there. So, and there are programs as well represented, except for the police are not, so we'll take that under advisement. Okay. All right, we're going to move along. So now we will open the floor up from business from the floor, from any community members who wish to address council or us on any matter.
Like path to the Tolia, the customers from the island.
The bike path?
Are we going to get one soon? Sidewalk?
We just finished up the, as reported earlier, the corridor development environmental study, and when the corridor is going to be redeveloped this coming spring, and then those will be included in there. There's plans out there already. We had consultation sessions for various inputs from different community members, and that's where all that information is going to be coming out. And I seen the draft design, proposal, conceptual drawings, and they're included. There's even a section in there for four-wheeler to stay off the main roads and be on the side, so they don't be in danger of the regular traffic.
And I seen some building material on the side of the crossroads. Are they already starting to put up some buildings there?
No, they're, what's going on there is there's a paving contract coming out, and I think they're gonna put some weeping tile down to help with the drainage for that paving project.
Okay. Anything else? Over here?
I went to the open house at Science School. By the way, it was very informative. All your departments showing up on their booths there. So I got to Jay Benedict's booth and I asked him about the roads. He says $1.6 million is coming up to do River Road in Snowy. And I said, well, what about Wade LaFrance Road? And he says, they're still looking for money to talk to your chiefs. So I'm going to bring this up to you guys. The $1.6 million is coming up to do River Road in Snowy. Can you just move it over to do Wade LaFrance Road? I think River Road is a lot better than Wade LaFrance Road. Well, yeah.
It's a long river road.
Well, no, actually, I can talk about that. We're in the process, the 1.6 million is only going to be doing from, I think, Wade LaFrance Road down towards Sugar Bush. The bad areas where we can't, they don't have the money to do the whole thing. So what we're doing is we're trying to pick the real severe areas. And another thing we did do was we designated the River Road as the main road in Snowy. So we'll fit the priorities of the Quebec funding. And another one is we designated Wade LaFrance Memorial Road as an evacuation route. So that way it'll fit the priorities of their funding too. So it's all work in progress, and everybody's just got to be patient. Tell them to keep delivering the mail, you know, potholes and whatnot, rain, snow, and storms. The mail's still got to be delivered. So it's all on our radar, it's all on our priorities. We got meetings coming up. We were just offered some from Quebec MTQ, and we're looking at that, and we're sending back a common proposal, and we think their stuff they proposed to us is not enough by spring.
We will provide an update next month in our meeting, and as to where things are at, but there are a number of ongoing files that we have with respect to the roads here in Yeah, Ganadago's in the planning stage for some different roads there as well. We are also looking at, we're going to be having a meeting with the department on financing of some of these bigger projects, because we're doing 1.6 kilometers here and 0.4 kilometers here, and it's not working very well. So we're looking at trying to bundle some big infrastructure and go to the department and discuss with them how we can finance this now and pay for it over a longer period of time. We will put this as a standing order to update again next month. Over here in the back, Mr. David.
Well, I was just wondering, I live over here on Birch Road, and for like almost 10 years now, we have sulfur water, and this has been in, I don't know, there's somebody we've been talking to, and it's for a second time now we've had to clean our water heaters because of the sulfur overload, and all our pipes are getting corroded, and that's all we've been hearing is, oh, it's in discussion. And we get paid like 6 water jugs, and it lasts us 2 weeks. The rest of the month we're on water bottles. I was just wondering what the progress on that is, because we keep hearing the same answers over and over.
Yeah, is there anybody that can speak to that? I know that this specific road has been a priority of the district chiefs. I can tell you that, and I know that it has been ongoing for a long time. Unfortunately, it's not simple because the road has some challenges with the easement and property owners, and we just can't get to the point of having the permission by the property owners to put the pipeline down. The chiefs have asked the executive director to set up these meetings with our legal counsel and the landowners to try to get through the issues that exist. We can get an update for you specifically where it is at right now, but I know that this is ongoing. This has been ongoing up until, just about 2 weeks ago, the chiefs had raised it again, the executive director, he is working on that, so.
What, could you give us more water every month? Because right now, I'm cracking into your water line at the fire hydrant to fill up my thing. I know you don't want me to do that.
Yeah, I didn't read a lot, well, I wasn't aware, but I'm personally aware. But no, we can take that back and find out if there's the ability to provide more potable water, more bottles. Yeah, we will take that as a follow-up.
Actually, with you utilizing one of the fire hydrants in the area, it saves DTS from flushing them off.
That's not the point.
We're not going to charge you for it, but we are looking into the issue. Like Grand Chief has stated, it's property issues that's got to get resolved before that can proceed. But they're on it, Chief Joe's been on it for 12 years, he says. So it's property issue, that's the main thing, it's all about property. I had the same issue in my neighborhood before the water line took it down. A person married into the family and she's got the house at the beginning of the road. All my family members that lived on that road for 50 years are denied the water line is because the first individual doesn't want it. So what we did was we all went over there and visited that individual and say, you married into my family and this has been all mine, harmony, respect, peace, and then you come in and you disrupt it just because you don't want it. So she said, whoa, what am I doing? You're affecting the lives of everybody else on the road. And she quickly talked to her, boom, sign the easement, away we went. Maybe that needs to happen in your area. I don't know.
April, did you want to respond?
Do you, are you given the water from community health still, or is that something you have to purchase on your own?
They give us like 6 water jugs.
Okay.
They don't last.
Okay, well, we can see if we can increase that for you.
Like all our pipes, we just had someone do assessment and my in-floor heating is about to go out because of all the residue gas.
Okay.
We got to pay for that out of pocket.
We will get you an update before the next general meeting. We'll specifically communicate with you. And I know this has been ongoing. It's not simple because we're trying to get through the easement issues and the landowner issues for that road, but it has been been on our docket to continue to find a solution to this. We will be in touch in the next couple of weeks. Okay, anything else from the community for this morning? Okay, if not, we'll move along then. We have a resolution that I need to read for the record.
I'm serious with all the application of my children. My children are in kindergarten. This is a white man that came from Ontario to take my kids out of school.
First can't go into a lot of detail on this. I know that you have communications with the district chiefs about this issue specifically, and you had sent me a couple of emails about this. We have asked our administration to review specifically your concern or your file to ensure that all practices were in accordance and that nothing was out of the ordinary. Unfortunately, what has happened is we can't change that. Council doesn't have the ability to direct the workforce, and we are continuing to keep on the executive of the organization to make sure this review is done and that nobody's rights were compromised at any point in time.
According to my lawyer, all the procedures and protocols were not followed.
Well, the matter is of a personal issue. I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail on this. It is before the courts, so there is an avenue there, but I can tell you that council is well aware and is ensuring that there was no compromise in protocol or procedure, and if there was, there will be appropriate actions taken by our administration.
One more thing. They also, in their service statement, find out in keeping families together, and we're sober. We don't drink.
No, I know that this is a very difficult time for you, and I can tell you that council is keeping an eye on it, and that we do not want to be in a position where people are losing their children. Those decisions are beyond our control, but we are continuing to ensure that, again, that if anything was done out of the ordinary and not have been done, that people are held accountable.
Well, somebody should be. They were kidnapped from school.
Thank you. We will continue to move that forward.
Why don't we do these interviews with people who don't even relate to our family? These are my little brothers. I was raised with these people. Nobody asked me for an interview. The chief was across the road. How come nobody asked her? They just take them. I've talked to multiple families, and this happened to a lot of people. I can't even talk to them because I'm a brother. I'm not their parents.
Yes. Unfortunately, those decisions are outside of council's control, but again, we will ensure that policies are followed. We can't get into the specifics on this. I know this is highly emotional, and we are deeply concerned that if there was anything wrongdoing that had happened, but these decisions are not administrative, are not our decisions. They're administrative, but we will ensure that if wrong was done, that people fix those wrongs and are held accountable for them, if that is the case. Thank you for expressing that. Okay. All right, we're going to move along with this resolution. Council accepts and approves the general meeting minutes of August 24th, 2017. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Joel, second by Connie. Discussion? Question's been called on a resolution. All in favor? Any against this resolution?
And I vote no because I was not in attendance for that meeting.
Okay, one against? All right, it's carried. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all of you for coming to this Saturday morning general meeting. The next general meeting will be on October 26th at 6 p.m. on the Villanova Recreation Center as well. The Slide District meeting is October 11th. The Navajo District meeting is October 16th, and the Villanova District meeting is October 23rd. Thank you very much to all. Could I have a motion to adjourn? Tim and Joe. Thank you.